Welcome everyone to my August 2021 webinar. I picked a subject tonight that I thought was very relevant to everyone. And I gave it a title from the classics, The Sword of Damocles, which is probably a myth, but was picked up long ago by, and I don't have it here now, I've forgotten who it was. I could probably call it up, but it's not worth it. And the basic story is that Damocles was a servant and very solicitous of his king, and was kind of carrying on quite a bit. So the king offered that Damocles could sit on his couch. He didn't use a throne, he was reclining on a couch, and he could sit on that couch for a whole day and experience all the luxury and having the servants wait on him and just the beautiful splendor of the court. And what he did not explain, what the emperor did not explain to Damocles, was that he would hang a sword by a single horse tail hair over the couch. And it was to let Damocles know that even though he was basking in luxury, that he would be vulnerable to basically being eliminated, without warning and for no obvious reason, just by luck. And that had to do with the basic understanding that in that context, that it was that, even those in power are at peril of having that power and wealth taken away from them by those who covet it. But the story has broad application, and that's really what I wanted to talk about tonight, is the broad sense that we all have to some degree, whether it be just a vague fear, or perhaps a more present kind of worry or anxiety, or perhaps even a very intense terror that of the potential loss of our power, our wealth, our health, even our life. It's just so precarious. You can be walking down the street. I have this image in my mind. There was quite an accident in Fairfield yesterday afternoon, and somebody could have been at the street corner where the accident occurred and been wiped out in a second. And it just happens that quickly. But other situations that we all face are not nearly so dramatic. Sure, when we face existential crises, such as, we have a fatal diagnosis, or, there's other things, we might, we naturally be very worried about that. And that's usually quite a conscious worry, and not an unreasonable one, in the sense that, yes, there really is a threat there. But we might also, have that kind of real dread when we're facing some tests from the doctors, or some risky therapies or surgical procedures in which, there is some imminent danger. We get that sense that there's this fear, that comes with a sword hanging over us that could snuff us out at any moment. So that fear could lurk in the background, even when we feel like we're doing really well, even when things are going very nicely for us. There may be just that little bit of not irrational fear, right? That, in reality, life is tenuous, and, we could have a reversal in health or wealth or social status at any moment. And sometimes that fear is quite overshadowing, and it's debilitating to us. We just can't do things. We just have that sense of impending doom, or sense that, things are just going to go badly, even though they're going really well. But it can get even worse when things aren't going so well, right? When we actually have a diagnosis, or we've had a loss, and then it's like we really worry about things. I should take this opportunity to remind everyone of another story, a biblical story, the story of Job, which I'll just focus on the fact that Job lost everything. We don't need to talk about why, but Job lost everything, and his family, his land, his animals, his social status, and many of people that knew him, ridiculed him for his losses, and so on. And so, here is Job, who was supposedly a righteous person, and he lost everything. And he had no immediate explanation for why that was happening. The book of Job is interesting because of his discourses with people, where he basically refutes the karmic explanations for that he's been a bad person, and he's really not as righteous as he says he is, and so on and so forth. And he refutes all of that. So it's an interesting read. It's one of the longest stories in the Bible, and it really is a very excellent discourse on karma. But then there's also this other element, of course, that Job was in the situation, which he didn't know, because of a wager between Satan and God. And God had wagered that there was one truly devoted, truly committed person in his community, of humans on earth, and that, Satan lost the bet, which is a good thing, I guess. But there is that sense, that we have things and then we lose them. It could be stuff, or it can be social position. It can be relationships, so on and so forth. These things come to us that way. So even minor things, some people have a real hard time paying their bills or facing other deadlines for assignments or projects at work. And they develop a great deal of anxiety sometimes when facing just those kind of deadlines. Most of us, I think, get a certain amount of anticipatory dread, thinking about going to the dentist or going for a medical appointment, even when there's no reason to believe there's anything wrong. But you're going to go to the dentist, and somehow that's not always a really pleasant experience. And then, they might find a cavity or some other problem. And so, there's some worry about that. And certainly going to a doctor just for a general checkup, just your routine physical, and you might find out, that something is wrong that needs attention. It might be major or it might be minor, but, the anticipation of that can produce quite a bit of anxiety. Speaking engagements I put on my list, and I can remember, you may not believe this, but long ago, I developed quite a bit of anxiety around, knowing I was going to have to speak at some occasion. I don't have that problem anymore. I've done it so much. I guess I've trained myself out of it, but it's a very real thing for a lot of people. I know, family things like visits from in-laws can be, quite disturbing for some people. And just any other opportunity, where we might get some bad news about physical or emotional pain might result. Fear of failure is a classic one, that can be very debilitating. It's that anticipation that something will go wrong, even though basically we're competent and we can handle the situation. But, I think sometimes even before a webinar, it's like, well, I'm going to have to get up and speak. And even though I've maybe made some notes and done some research and thought about the topic quite a bit, and then I'm going to have to get up there and talk pretty much nonstop for something close to a half an hour. And so there might be a little bit of something in the background there. So what do we do with all of this? What do we do with this fear? And again, it's not necessarily irrational fear, right? It's fear of something that actually could happen. First of all, I got to remind everyone that fear is always about the future. It's about something bad happening to us. So why do we have fear? Why do we anticipate the future with fear? That's a good question, don't you think? It's a really good question. Why do we have fear? The answer really is that the fear is trying to protect us. It's trying to make us cautious. It's trying to make us attentive. It's trying to make us take in everything that needs to be taken in about a situation so that we can handle it. I do a great deal of babysitting these days. My granddaughter is going on 2 years of age, and she is a child that I've noticed from very early age really takes in what's going on around her. She watches, right now, she's really into watching other children play and do things. And then after a while, she wants to do them too. But she always studies the situation. And some people said she's shy or she's fearful. I don't really see it that way. What I see is a child who's examining the situation. And that's really what the role of fear is. It's to help us examine a situation. We don't have to experience it as fear, which is that tension that we get usually right in here. Sometimes it's a little lower down in the pit of the stomach, but oftentimes it's down low in the heart area and the lower chest. And that fear is to make us be careful, make us figure out what we need to do, make us be alert and cautious. But as you all know, sometimes that fear, then we make a choice. Okay, I won't do that because, it might not work out. And that can come up in any kind of situation, where we're very cautious. And so we pass up opportunities or sometimes just don't get things done. Like paying the bills, for instance, we have a certain fear. Oh, I'm going to mess this up. I'm not going to pay all the bills. I'll forget to pay one, or I'll write down the wrong number. I shouldn't ask, but I will anyway. How many of you, when you write a check, go back and look at it carefully to make sure that you've put in the right amount? I'll bet a fair number of you have done that. I'm not going to do a poll, but just that kind of a situation. But how many of you can remember in the last few days, even perhaps not doing something because you just had some concern it wasn't going to work, it wasn't going to be the right thing to do right then. Some problem was going to ensue, right? It's not that your fear was ill-founded, but did you ask really, what's the likelihood of that happening? Really, is it really going to not work out? Well, it might not, but that's always true. But, how cautious do we need to be? A lot of times we're protecting ourselves from failure. Yes, from the humiliation of failure. That's what's really behind that, is that, it's even going to be personal humiliation, meaning we're going to blame ourselves or we're going to take it on ourselves. Oh, I messed up. I didn't do that right. But maybe it's going to be humiliation from others, particularly in work environments, also in sports, and lots of other situations where if we do not perform, perhaps even in an outstanding way, but certainly adequately, then we're going to get some pushback from our colleagues or friends. Even a friendly, I don't know why I thought of it, but bridge game. Does anybody play bridge anymore? I haven't played in decades. Even a friendly card game or board game that you might be playing with a group of friends, if you're playing, particularly as partners, and you don't perform well, your partner may, make some comment about it, or even the people you're playing against might make some comment about it. You're playing poker, for instance, probably much more popular game these days. Get that same kind of feeling, that pushback against you for not succeeding. So how do we deal with this? Well, we've recognized that fear has a purpose. And so the first step is to say, oh, there's something inside me, and I like this language so much. It comes from the focusing world. There's something inside me that is afraid I will, and then it's either fail, not succeed, whatever it is that, I'm going to get something bad's going to happen to me, and going to get a diagnosis of something, or, my investments aren't going to do well, or something like that. And so just acknowledging that something inside me is afraid that, and then whatever it is, we just say that just mentally to ourselves is a very good thing to do. We'll do this in the group clearing exercise that's going to follow my presentation. But we just can say that to ourselves. Something inside me is afraid. It's good to put a hand wherever that fear is. As I said, it tends to be in the lower chest or upper abdomen, in the pit of the stomach, as they say, but it can be elsewhere. So wherever it is, and then you can say, and it feels like, and then describe it. What does that fear feel like? Excuse me, I'm going to try to moisten my throat. What does that feel like? So you say it, it feels like this. And you can say it just mentally to yourself, but it's nice to actually use those words, because these words help us to objectify our experience. That means I am experiencing pain. I am experiencing fear. And I'm here with that. And that helps us to create a bit of space between ourself and our experience, so that we're witnessing our experience. We're having experience, but who we are is a witness to that experience, not the experience. And we forget that, we're having fear, and it's like, I'm afraid, we say. I'm afraid, rather than I am having fear. I am sensing fear. See the difference? We'll practice this in a little bit, but that is a nice step to begin to separate from our experience, so that we can see that we have fear. Now, there's a very important part of this teaching, which is not very common in the world out there. And that important part is that we don't try to get rid of the feeling. The fear is there for a purpose. And we can even say that to that part. It's I'm sensing this part. It's fearful, and I'm here with it, and that's okay, or it's okay, however you want to say it. Just that we acknowledge that it's there, and that we're okay with that. We can be afraid. It has a good purpose. It has a good purpose. We don't tell it it's too much or anything. It's there. It's just there. And even when we say that, there's this sense of relaxation that takes place in the body. And we start to release some of that pent-up energy that fear was holding, wasting for us. But no resentment about that. It releases. It releases on its own. We don't have to do anything. We don't try to get rid of the fear. We don't want to deny that fear is there. I had an opportunity today to ask my mentor in this focusing thing, what do we say to a client who has existential fear for their existence, fear that the sword is going to fall on them at any moment? And the answer was to just say hello to that fear and let it know that you appreciate how much it fears dying or having something really bad happen. And that it's okay that it's there. The reason there's often so much energy bound up in a fear is that we are afraid to feel it. So something inside me doesn't want to experience the fear. And that's very useful when we're really not sure what we're feeling. You say to yourself, well, okay, what am I feeling? And you go, I'm not feeling anything. Something inside me feels afraid to feel anything. Okay, where is that fear of feeling something reside? It's somewhere in there. Maybe we can find it, but then maybe we can't. You say, okay, it's hiding. And you just let it know. I understand you're hiding. You're not going to show me where you are. That's okay. I'll just sit here and wait. You may have to wait a while, but it's usually, it may seem like it's a while, but it's usually not all that very long before it starts to convey a little more information about itself, what it's afraid of, what it's afraid will happen, what it's trying to protect you from, what feeling it's trying to protect you from, if it's the part that doesn't want you to feel, right? It doesn't want you to feel because it's afraid that feeling is going to be overwhelming. This is a way of approaching particularly abusive histories, right? I know something happened to me. Something must have happened to me. I have no idea what it was. I can't feel it. I can't remember it. Okay, something inside me doesn't want me to remember, doesn't want me to feel those feelings, doesn't want me to remember that situation because it's afraid that remembering will be overwhelming. Isn't that interesting? If you say it that way, can you feel that? If you say it like that, it just creates a space where that pain can start to emerge, and the part that's afraid can relax a little bit and let that happen. That's why it is emerging, because the part that's afraid of feeling, afraid that that feeling will be overwhelmingly unpleasant, painful, uncomfortable, that part can relax a little bit. And there may be other parts too, parts that have judgment, for instance. Something inside me is judging me for whatever the situation was. It's being critical of me. Oh, I'm going to say hello to that. I'm going to allow that part in. Some other part may say, no, don't do that, right? There may be some resistance. You say, okay, something inside me doesn't want some other part to be okay with acknowledging the presence of another part. So there can be a chain like that, relationships, layers of blocking. That's perfectly normal. It's perfectly okay. We just say hello to that. And I'm here with all of these is a nice phrase. When I say that, I can just feel the relaxation in the atmosphere. I'm here with all of this. I'm here with all of this. When we do all of this and allow the fear to be acknowledged, it releases the energy. There's relaxation that occurs. And then physiological changes can take place. We start functioning more healthfully because we're not holding an energy that can then, if it's not acknowledged, eventually produce disease. And a lot of times people come to me with a physical complaint. They have a disease or they have something wrong. Typically, it's a pain. And so my job in the energy work that I do is to go back and find the source of the pain and to deal with the parts that are blocking acknowledging that, because it showed up physically because we did not deal with the emotion. And sometimes it's a long history. I was working with someone who had, I don't want to give a lot of detail. Something had happened in a past lifetime, actually a couple of past lifetimes. And in this lifetime, they were working that out and paying quite a price for it. But by simply acknowledging that on that subtle level, on the gross level, it opened an opportunity for real change to start to take place. And we're still working on it, but we'll see how that goes. But when we change the emotional state by opening up to it, by just leaving the door open, so to speak, the energy just flows out and then things can normalize. And we don't have to do a lot of work. We don't have to relive painful situations. The fears don't overwhelm us, actually, because they're just there. They're just there. And the peace comes within that's very profound and puts an end to that karma. That's really an important point. It puts an end to that karma. And so the emperor can take away the sword that's hanging over Damocles, and he can be safe. He doesn't have to jump off the couch and run away, which is what he did in the story. But it's only a story. But our fears of pain, failure, humiliation, we can deal with all of them. Our fears of getting a diagnosis or of the consequences of the diagnosis, therapies we may have to go through. Maybe it's a legal situation, right? Maybe we did something little bit, stretching things a little legally, and then, it caught up with us. And now we have to pay some, retribution to someone. Restoration, I guess it is. We have to restore things. And so, there's a humiliation perhaps, unless you're like certain people, which will not name, who don't feel that, but, they may not learn the lesson, but they may still have to make the restoration. So different ways we may wind up dealing with it, but fundamentally it's looking at it with objectivity. That is to say, a space between ourself and our experience, instead of just saying, I am hurting, I am afraid. Very, very important point. I think I will stop there and see if there are any questions. You can use the chat function to ask me any questions about this. Give you a few seconds here. See if anybody writes anything in the chat box. Very good. So I'll just announce here, and I'll do it again at the end of the group clearing session, that the next webinar will be on September 14th. And I actually have a topic. I watched the show on Netflix called Atypical, which is about a teenage boy who graduates from high school and then goes off to college, who is, as we say, on the spectrum, on the autism disorders spectrum. We're all on the autism disorder spectrum. It's just some of us are a little further out than others. So we'll be asking really deep questions about what is normal and how do we relate to people who are not typical. Of course, the title is Atypical. And in the show, you meet a lot of, it's a great show. It's still on Netflix, and you can meet a lot of very interesting characters. There are 4 seasons of the show. So that'll be next month on September 14th. So please, if you can, mark the date, and hopefully I'll get invitations out a little earlier than I did this month and be more organized. Okay, it's been great doing the presentation with you. We'll end that here.